which allowed us into their video to see what was happening to their car on the racetrack, and it's some unbelievable footage. Let's take a look at this. At one point, they mounted the camera on the side skirt, and take a look at Kurt Busch going around the racetrack here, and how steady he holds it. And actually, you can see at one point the side skirt hits the racetrack, and a puff of smoke just comes right up. So they actually had to cut that side skirt just a little bit so it wouldn't hit the racetrack. But you can see as he moves it around the racetrack, he kept it about 4 inches off of that yellow line. But other views are great. They mounted it all over the place during the test yesterday, and at one location during the draft yesterday, right inside the fender well. Take a look at that right there. You can see the tire right there, and Clint Boyer drafting out on the racetrack yesterday. And that shows them a lot of data as to what that tire is doing as it goes around the racetrack. Now, another location that they used as well is up underneath the rear end of the race car to see what those suspension components are doing. You can see the travel of the rear end housing right there. That's some unbelievable footage. And yes, we use the Pi system to collect a lot of the data, but that visual aspect allows these teams to digest exactly what's going on there. This is my favorite right here. Take a look at this tire, the right front tire, and how it moves. As it goes into the corner, you see the tire move on the lateral load and actually expand a little bit on the racetrack. So that way they can tell exactly the lateral load and what the tire is doing on the plane of the racetrack. All this information came from Furniture Road Racing yesterday, and they were able to use this with all the information, that data collection that they did, to learn what that car was doing. They're going to go back home to their shops in Colorado and put all that together, and hopefully, because of all this, including this GoPro camera, come down with a better race car. Tart Verrier and the boys, the crew chief over there, very smart indeed.
Bob, that is some really, really cool shots. The one under the front of the front tire there was the one that fascinates me. The tire patch, we talk about camber all the time. Camber is this gap right here, and they use that to, you set the car up with static camber so you get the maximum tire patch in the corner. But look at the size of this sway bar. The sway bar itself and the arm. This part right in here is the sway bar. The biggest bar we had back in the day was 2 inches. I couldn't begin to tell you how big that sway bar in that car is. And another thing to look at is this gap right here. A lot of times you'll hear a team go out and they'll cut a tire down. They'll cut the sidewall out of the tire. That's because they got this arm too close to the tire, and when they went out, tire deflected, cut the tire down. But there's just some shots like this are fascinating to look at because this was all guesswork. We kind of guessed where everything was. We kind of guessed how much camera we needed. We look at the tire temp, which, by the way, is here, here, and here. Those were tire temps. You look at that and you say, okay, we need a little less, a little more camera. But that is a fascinating shot to me, Larry.
And Darryl, one thing that I see here, I want to point out 3 things. If you look back here, there's the shock absorber, and you talked about the sway bar, and then there's the front coil spring right in there. We don't see a lot of travel in the front of this car. Those are 3 items that NASCAR gives the teams liberty in the front suspension to work with. Now, let's go to the rear suspension shot that we had just a second ago. And, of course, you've got your shock absorber. It's hooked in right there at the bottom. And then the coil springs right there. Those items are pretty much mandated. And you'll notice a lot more travel in the rear of the car. Those springs are mandated at 400 pounds. That means it takes 400 pounds to compress that spring 1 inch. And pretty much every team will run the same shock absorber. The more this car travels in the rear, that hurts the drivability of that car, makes it faster, but it gets that rear spoiler out of the air.
Yeah, and I think you can see by that shot, Larry, what I'm talking about. See how the back of the car, it's got to be on the straightaway now because the back of the car came up. You watch it in the corner, the back of the car will sink down. Another thing that's different this year is this track bar.
I was just getting ready to say, fans at home always hear us talk about wedge adjustment and track bar adjustment, and they don't ever see this view of what happens underneath. They just see the wrench going in the back window, and they say, okay, what does that really mean? What are they doing?
Yeah, well, the track bar is hooked to the frame over here, so that's hooked over the frame. On this side over here, it's solid. It's bolted to the rear end housing. That's why you got all those little teeth in there so you can run it up and down. You can't do that on a pit stop unless you got a long track. Maybe Daytona you could, where you got to loosen that bolt and move it up and down. But over here, you got the wrench. That's where they go in there and start screwing it up or down or whatever. But this year, there's limits to how far you can move that bar up and down and what angle it can be on.
Because that will change travel the angle and the height of that track bar.
Well, it's all part of that package that last year everybody got into with the big rubber bushings and the rear end housings moving. And you remember Keselowski complained about the Hendrick cars, and saying, you know, everybody